to develop the system. And when they came to us and they found out there's a fiber grid system out here, they were like, are you kidding me? Like, that doesn't exist in most places, and they're bouncing radio shots from over hills and putting sites up on top of every tall hill so that they can communicate between their systems. So they got a copy of our grid, and they saw where all the sites were existing, and they layered on something that saved a lot of money in the long run, but it is the first kind of stretch at having a county-wide communication system that's not each district independently designing and implementing their own solution. It allows something like, if you're on if you go to the all broadcast channel and you hit the button, you're talking to the entire county. That's critical in some scenarios, but not all. But it's something that just doesn't exist right now. So right now we rely on relaying communication, and sometimes that could take upwards of 15 minutes to fully get information all the way out to where you need to. And that time is of the essence when you're battling an emergency situation. You need it quickly. So what's nice about this is that this also increases coverage. Right now, it's estimated that roughly about 60% is reliably covered with what we'd call mobile handset radio. So truck radios are stronger, handset radios not. If you click on that, you're probably not you're 4 times out of 10, you're gonna not get through, right? So you gotta move, go somewhere else, grab a more powerful radio, get in the truck or something like that. So we've been working really intimately with these groups, and we're excited about where it's going. It really provides a nice foundation or stepping stone to implement future technologies. Earlier, Gregg showed you the FEMA app, and kind of the day of always relying on just, I'm not dogging on the ham guys, but some of those analog systems, they have limitations, but they have benefits. The digital systems are great for mass information, pushes, keeping things quiet, but getting good information. There's a lot to be said about the ability to get a text message versus a voice communication. I have to be at the radio to hear the voice communication, and I can get a text. Text communication means I can receive the message and I know and I get it clearly, right? I don't have any distortion or anything on that when I see it. So there's a balance that I think we can find in technology that'll really lend to each technology's weakness and play to the strengths, where we have a really robust system. And I think what you should be proud of is that the leaderships and the commissioners and the people taking the lead on this project have gotten to this point finally where you guys are going to have the building blocks for a state-of-the-art system out in the islands.
Cool.
We're not. This is like we might as well be in another country. In all honesty, I mean that's how the logistics kind of play out. So hopefully by next year you'll see this system actually operating. That's the goal, is by the 1st of next year. So pretty quickly.
Can you hold on? We have a lot to get through.
I'll be kind of done with my section really quick, and then we can figure out where the question is good. But hold on to that thought. We definitely want to hear it.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about this, but so every LTE or fixed wireless site, pole site that we have in the county is being retrofitted with on-site generation propane generators that will run for, as Gregg said, they will technically run 48 hours, but we expect that we could probably get more like 3 or 4 days out of those sites. But they also have, you could refuel them. You could drop a different on-site generator on those things if you need to. They also have the battery backup too, which is great because it's not only it keeps the site up while it transfers over to generator power, but it also is, if generation fails, we have some time to get out there before the site goes down. And so this is important for the cellular network just as it is for adding in this layer of emergency services communications, because we don't want that system to drop for a moment. We want to be able to react to that and put that on the priority list and never see it go down. Now power's one thing, communication, cable breaking is another problem that that is solved differently. But then there's 3 POP locations that we bring traffic back into. Those are all backed up with generators for multiple days and battery units in the racks. If you ever are interested in it, they love to show it off. Foster loves to show it off, but the co-location in the POP center space over here it's state of the art. It exists here, and we've really put a lot of effort into making sure that we have some of the best systems in place to keep this system up and going. So you guys all know how the internet works, right? It's a spider web. Everything connects to everybody else. It literally is. If you, I don't know if they do public tours, but our internet exchange, yeah. No, you gotta get a key card. You gotta be with people, and it's pretty protected. But there's an internet exchange which I just had the chance of going down and visiting on Friday in Seattle. That's how we get to the World Wide Web, and mainly. There's multiple exchanges across the United States. There's the nearest ones we have are Seattle, Portland. There's Victoria, BC. Basically, that's kind of like a central place where everyone gets together. They bring all their traffic, and then that's where we cross-connect to everybody else. And it literally is cross-connecting. If you pictured a room that was 4 times this size, and it was rack after rack after rack after rack of just yellow fiber cable, thousands and thousands and thousands of cross connections, that's called a meet me room. That is literally what it's doing. It's building connections between things. So that's a passive way of doing it. There's a way you can plug into switches and do that too. It's an incredible site. Quick side note, that Weston building is number 2 in Seattle for power consumption. Number 2. The only thing that takes more power than that building is a smelting plant in Seattle. That's it. The backup generation is 22 megawatts.
Yeah.
Do you know how much power San Juan County uses on demand at peak? 14 megawatts. This county does half of what that generation is capable of building, and that's simply because that's such a critical component, is these exchange centers. So what Rock Island is doing is being smart about its planning. We used to have all of our transport networks that ran straight to the west end, and we had 4 different routes, some dark, some lit circuits, and we would go different routes on some were on the same. But what we saw was what happens when the west end has a problem. If you lose that, you lose internet connectivity. That's why we've recently have built a relationship with a company called Noel, and they are trafficking us up to the VIX. So we actually go up to Vancouver as a backup. What that means is the Weston fails, or the route to the Weston fails, we actually do have a way out. Now, the radio communication system, though, is local here, right? So we don't rely on any of that connection to make sure that the first responders can communicate here in this network. It's completely isolated and independent and has lots of failovers in it. But that's kind of a 1-2 on how we get out of here, and that's really how everyone in this region gets out and talks to the internet.
Can I make one comment about this slide before we leave? And that is, you'll notice on this map over here, these are all the subsea cables that leave the west coast. It's worth noting that in a major tsunami, a lot of these in Northern California and Oregon are going to get taken out. So it's not going to kill the internet, because the internet is kind of self-healing, but it is going to significantly reduce capacity out to Asia. May or may not cause problems for us, but it will probably happen.
Yeah, definitely. So there was a few things that Greg and I were collaborating on that I think are great tidbits of information that you should know. If you have gone outside, or you're out walking the rurals and you're like, I don't have cell service, but something emergency happens, dial 911. So if your phone, say that again, if your phone shows that you do not have service, dial 911. Some may not know this, some may know this, but your phones, all of them are required to be able to make that call out, no matter what cellular network you're on. If you're on AT&T, you're on Verizon, you're on T-Mobile, it doesn't matter, Cricket, whatever else you're doing, the phone has to be able to dial out 911. So it may show you have no service, dial it. If you can pick up anything, it'll make that call. So I think that's something that I feel like just doesn't get talked about enough. We don't know. You know, you look, you go, no, I have nothing, I put it away. Try it. It's worth trying.
Yeah, the corollary to that is, you may have a phone that doesn't even have an active subscription. It should still be able to call 911.
Yeah, it still will. Yeah, you always can dial out. Yeah, there's a few good points that Greg's got on here, so go ahead and take over.
Yeah, sure. And we'll get back to your question as soon as we get to that, and hopefully we'll have a little more time for that. You all know to send a text, right? If the voice circuits are congested, text is more likely to get through. And obviously we've all probably had a problem where we get on a Canadian cell network at some point, and if you have a carrier that likes to penalize you for that, you might have been charged extra for jumping on the cell network over Victoria. It's a great thing though if our county is disconnected, so make that happen to your benefit. Okay, but let's say all the generators have run out of fuel and you're stuck, no phone service, no internet service, no nothing. and you're having some sort of personal emergency and need to summon a first responder. There are some other things you can do. These are not great. They're not always going to work, but consider trying them. One, if you are near a boat, have a VHF radio, VHF Marine Radio, you can call Mayday on channel 16. The Coast Guard is listening. They'll be very upset if you call Mayday and it's not an emergency. And they'll also not like it very much if you're not actually anywhere near the water. However, if this is a difference between life or death, I think they're going to be understanding, and they'll send out a helicopter or do whatever they need to do if they can to help you out. If you are concerned about this, beyond that, and especially if you do a lot of traveling into wilderness areas, you might want to consider a satellite messenger. These things are kind of like a texting device that allows you to get word out no matter where you are, as long as you have a view of the sky. They require a subscription service, typically $200, $300 a year. You can also get roadside assistance with these orange ones from the Spot or the InReach from Garmin. If you're an offshore sailor, you probably know about EPIRBs and personal locator beacons. They will also summon the cavalry, but it's one button and it's summon the cavalry. So when you press that, they're going to do everything they can to get to you, and it's going to be very, very expensive. It's also going to potentially put first responders' lives on the line. So really think hard before you press that button, because somebody might get hurt trying to save your butt. Okay, we've talked all about devices. These things all run on power. How are you going to have power to run them if the grid is down? We've been moving more and more and more to rechargeable devices, which is great. You're not throwing a lot of batteries in a landfill. I am a big advocate of that. But there are some situations where even your pre-charged device is going to run out of juice. And keep it simple. The keep it simple approach here really works. Traditional cylindrical AA batteries work really, really reliably. And the technology has actually been improving a little bit lately. There's a new chemistry out called lithium iron disulfide. There's currently only one major manufacturer that makes these. They are Energizer Ultimates. There are a few companies in China that are also making them, but they're harder to get. They're a little more expensive than alkaline, but the shelf life is amazing. The performance in cold weather is amazing, and for high draw applications like, say, a radio transmitter or a cell phone recharger, they're going to work a lot better. They'll give you a much longer life. A flashlight that has a high power LED in it, maybe 3 times the lifespan with these batteries. So they are considered hazardous materials because of the lithium content, so you need to dispose of them at the exchange. You can't just, in a special box, you can't just throw them in the landfill. But it's worth having some of these. A case of these, this is 144 batteries right here. That's going to last you quite a while. It's going to last you quite a while, and it's not that expensive really as a bit of insurance.
And those aren't rechargeable.
These are not rechargeable, right? That's the thing. But because they're not rechargeable, they hold their initial charge a lot longer. That's how you get the 20-year lifespan out of them. So you buy them, your devices are all going to be replaced a couple times probably before the batteries go bad. So I think it's a pretty good bit of insurance. And the landfill impact, I think, is probably a fair trade-off for being able to use these devices, your radio or whatever you need to use in a disaster. So, but let's assume you didn't go buy a case of these and you have no batteries and the emergency happens tomorrow, you haven't had a chance to prepare. You can still use your car, obviously, get in, turn on an accessory, turn on the radio, get some news. That's not really particularly hard. Just don't forget that it's there and it actually has that capability. You can certainly recharge the battery in your car, run the radio or run the battery down. Just try not to run it down below about 12 volts or you may not be able to restart it. You also damage your battery if you go down too low. There's a charging battery level thing on the handout, so that might be handy for that. I recommend getting one of these little things here on the left. It's a cell phone charging adapter that goes in your cigarette lighter. You probably already have one, but does the one you have a voltmeter on it? You might want to get one that has a voltmeter on it, unless the display on your dashboard is really good. That's about $12 on Amazon, so worth picking up. Okay, so all else has failed. Let's say your car battery's dead, your cell phone's dead, you don't have anything else at your house, you can't reach anybody. What are you going to do? Well, our fire department's kind of got you covered, and the amateur radio community kind of has you covered here. We have a plan to staff the fire department fire stations around the island with volunteer radio operators. And each of these fire stations has an antenna for an amateur radio in it. folks, if we have enough volunteers available, that's a big if, would deploy there if there's an emergency, and you could go there as a central place to get information. Possibly get medical help. I don't know what we have for first responders available there, but I assume it would be your rallying point as well for local gathering. So that's a place where you can physically go, put on your sneakers, use SneakerNet, and walk over to the fire station if you have to, or use your little bit of precious gasoline to get to that close spot. And actually, before I move on, I should mention the Auxiliary Communication Service, in addition to staffing fire stations, we have a larger capability here at the main fire station. We have a similar capability on all of the main fire stations around the ferry service islands. Shaw excluded. The Emergency Operations Center is connected in with ham radio volunteers. We have a mobile incident command vehicle here on the island. The hospital, the sheriff's office. So that communications network is there if everything else doesn't work, assuming we can get power to those systems, some sort of backup power. Let's see. Okay. So that's how all that works. You've got it all in your heads now. You've got all of your other preparation under control. Maybe you want to think about getting involved in this. Well, double check that you actually have all your stuff under control and you do have your water and your food, et cetera, and you're in reasonably good physical shape and you can manage running a 12-hour shift in the middle of the night volunteering. But if so, consider getting into amateur radio. We will talk a little bit more about what amateur radio looks like in just a sec, but I think it's kind of fun. And I'm not going to explain a lot of it, but if you have questions and we have Q&A time, we'll get into a little bit about what amateur radio is involved in that's not emergency response. But let's talk about amateur radio in context of what other radio technologies you might have heard of, okay? You probably, if you're like most Americans, at some point bought an FRS radio. These are the things that you can buy in a blister pack at a big box store, a sporting goods store. They run about 60 to 80 bucks for two of them typically. They can run on AA batteries, this one does. They have a range of maybe a couple miles if all is working well. But they're cheap, they're super simple. You don't have to have a license to use one. You can use it to talk to your neighbors. You have, say, 10 neighbors within range. You all get these. You all say, hey, in an emergency, turn on channel 1. We'll check in with each other. That'll work. You can get these on eBay for about 25 bucks. I've listed some decent models in the handout. Please get ones that run off of some power source that you know is going to be available. If you're stocking AA batteries, get one that runs on AA batteries. If you have some sort of alternative power system, fine. But make sure you understand how you're going to run it. Moving up, there's GMRS radio. Has more power to transmit out. You need more power to power it. You also need a license, 70 bucks, lasts for 10 years, applies to your whole extended family. There is a system that runs GMRS on Decatur. It's what they use because they don't have any first responders there. So a lot of people on Decatur have these things in their house. They can talk to a repeater up on the top of Decatur or directly to each other. And if, say, for example, a wildfire breaks out on Decatur, the first thing that's going to happen is whoever sees it is going to pick up their GMRS radio and they're going to say, hey, there's a wildfire on this corner of the island. Grab your bucket and let's go. And it's a little bit grassroots, but it gets the job done. So that's out there. There's no test required, so you don't really have to have any skill to use. Well, it would help if you had skill, but you're not required to have skill to use one, just a checkbook. However, if you're going to bother doing that, cost-wise, it's actually really similar to doing amateur radio, and you're getting into more capability if you decide to do amateur radio. So I would probably encourage you to not go GMRS unless you're involved in a group that already has that capability. And I do want to mention there is a GMRS repeater here on Orcas, and the Oddfellows has decided to use that for coordinating amongst themselves. And for that application, I think it works really well because they've pre-programmed all the radios. They know how they're going to use it. They have their own dedicated, well, not completely dedicated, but they have their own repeater. So that's around. Let's see. So who was here? Mike Hurwich was here somewhere. There he goes. And wanted to talk a little bit about how Oddfellows is using that system, so you know that that's out there and they have that capability. And you can jump on the repeater as well using a different code and share that capability a little bit, so if you want to.
Okay.
I'll give you a mic.
Yeah. So
There you go.
we've got basically two things. We got a bunch of these little radios. About half a dozen of us have bought these on our own. These are little 5-watt radios, but they're supposed to be line of sight. It doesn't really mean that you have to actually be able to see the other person. We've communicated using these from the Odd Hall to here, for example. So one of the scenarios that we could envision is if we've got something going at the Odds Hall where, we're, I don't know, letting people come over there to, their houses aren't safe or something like that. Or then, we can have somebody here, maybe the people will come here and say, hey, I need help, blah, blah, blah. But it's not, it's something that maybe we can help with. Then the person here gets on this and says, hey, this person needs this and that, can you help them? Yes. Maybe somebody here will actually, take them over there or whatever is required. And then the other thing we have is the repeater. Now like I said, these are only 5 watts, but the repeater I think is maybe 50, is that right? Yeah. So, that has a lot more strength. And like we have guys scattered all around the island who might either be able to give somebody help or may need help. And so with that repeater, we can hit a lot of those guys. So, you can choose which button you push on here, whether you're talking through the repeater or not. And so we can get on the repeater and just maybe ask around and say, hey, is everything okay? Does anybody out there need help? Blah, blah, blah. So those are basically the two things that we have.
So I think the moral of the story is if you know somebody who's an odd fellow, check see if they have one of these. And if they're closer than the fire station near you, maybe check with them first and see if they have any news or can get you some help. And if you really don't want to get an amateur radio license, but you want to be able to talk to more people than just your neighbors, you might want to look into GMRS. Okay? Yeah. So let's see. I should mention, with regard to what you can do with amateur radio, yes, you have to pass an exam. It's a little bit technical, but kids have passed this. I think on the island we've had a 12-year-old pass the first radio exam. So it's not super difficult. You want to put your mind to it a little bit. Some studying is required. But the license itself is free. And here in the county, any exams we offer are going to be free. Outside the county, some folks charge $25 for it to cover the cost of administration, but still, not that bad. Cheaper than GMRS. Radio equipment, similar price range. And you get a lot more channels to work with. You get a lot more technical capability. If you're into that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. If you get the next level amateur radio license up from the first one, you have privileges that allow you to talk around the planet. So that's really handy in a disaster, also kind of fun. There are contests, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on where amateur radio operators practice doing this so that they're actually ready to go, their equipment is tuned, their skills are tuned when it's actually needed.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of the odd guys also are doing that. I've got a technician and one other guy at least that I know of is going for that as well. So we can serve as a linking point where we know what, at least listening to what the guys are doing, maybe talking to them and be able to be in a link to
Cool.
that. Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Actually, that's not much to add on this one, I don't think. We talked about that. Yeah. It's not just in the county. Department of Homeland Security, Red Cross, the state EOC, which we can talk to from here, all employs ham radio operators. It tends to be what our federal government and state governments fall back to. So stuff does get tested on a regular basis. We have drills here in the county twice a month. We have statewide drills a few times a year.